If you visit Dover Castle, you will see what everyone sees: the massive stone keep built by Henry II, the Roman lighthouse that has stood for nearly 2,000 years, the White Cliffs dropping 350 feet to the English Channel below, with France visible on the horizon just 21 miles away. What you will not see, unless you know where to look, is the other castle, the one built beneath it, because under Dover Castle lies a tunnel network so vast, so secret, and so historically significant that it may be the most important underground military complex in British history. 3 miles of passages carved by hand into the chalk of the White Cliffs, 5 levels deep, and the site of an operation that saved over 338,000 lives and prevented the total collapse of the Allied cause in Europe. This is not a tourist attraction that happens to have some tunnels. This is a fortress beneath a fortress, one that has been used in every major conflict Britain has faced for over 800 years. Knights fought in the dark beneath these cliffs during a medieval siege. 2,000 soldiers lived underground here during the Napoleonic Wars. A vice admiral directed the largest military evacuation in history from a room named after a broken electrical generator. And during the Cold War, the deepest level was converted into a nuclear bunker designed to govern southeast England after an atomic attack. Though most people who visit Dover Castle walk right over it without knowing any of this, this is the dark story of the tunnel network beneath Britain's most famous castle. Dover has been fortified for as long as anyone can remember. The Iron Age Britons built earthworks on this cliff. The Romans, after they invaded in 43 AD, constructed a fort they called Dubri and erected an octagonal lighthouse, a pharos, that still stands today, nearly 2,000 years later. It is one of only 3 surviving Roman lighthouses in the entire former Roman Empire, and the most complete standing Roman structure in England. But it was in the 1180s that Dover Castle became the fortress we recognise. Henry II ordered the construction of the Great Stone Keep and the surrounding curtain walls, as transforming the site into a military stronghold of extraordinary power. Its position was unique. It commanded the shortest sea crossing between England and the continent. Whoever held Dover controlled access to the kingdom, which is why, in 1216, a French prince came to take it. The First Barons' War had torn England apart. A group of rebel barons, furious with King John, the same John who had been forced to sign the Magna Carta the year before, invited Prince Louis of France to cross the Channel and claim the English throne. Louis arrived in Kent with a large army in May 1216. Town after town fell. Castle after castle surrendered. But Dover did not fall. The castle was held by Hubert de Burgh, the Justiciar of England, with a garrison of just 140 knights and a small force of additional soldiers, and they were vastly outnumbered. And what followed was one of the most extraordinary sieges in English medieval history, because it was fought not just on the walls, but beneath them. Prince Louis deployed skilled miners to tunnel under the castle's twin-towered stone gatehouse. Their objective was brutally simple: dig beneath the foundations, pack the void with timber, set it alight, and when the supports burned through, the gatehouse would collapse into the hole. It was a technique that had brought down castle walls across Europe. The miners did their work. One of the gateway towers partially collapsed. The French launched a full assault on the breach, expecting to pour through the gap and overwhelm the defenders. But behind the rubble, Hubert de Burgh's men had built something the French did not expect: a barrier of boulders, outer timber crossbeams, and massive oak posts, erected in secret while the mining was still underway. The breach was impassable. The French assault broke against it like a wave against a cliff, and then the English went underground. De Burgh's garrison launched a countermining operation, digging their own tunnels to intercept and collapse the French mines from below. Picture what this meant: English soldiers crawling through narrow passages carved into chalk in near total darkness, armed with picks and short weapons, listening for the sounds of French miners doing the same thing from the other direction. When the tunnels met, men fought hand to hand in spaces too small to swing a sword. This was warfare at its most claustrophobic, and its most desperate. The English countermining worked. The French tunnels were collapsed. The siege dragged on for 10 months, but the castle never fell. And it was during this siege that someone gave Dover Castle the name that has defined it ever since. Before the decisive naval battle of 1217, when the French fleet was destroyed just off the coast, Hubert de Burgh addressed his men. He told them not to give up the castle, even if he himself were captured, because Dover, he said, was the key to England. The chronicler Matthew Paris recorded the phrase. It stuck. For 8 centuries, Dover Castle has been known as the key to England, the castle that, if lost, would unlock the kingdom to any invader. After the siege, de Burgh directed the construction of a new defensive spur linked to the castle by a system of underground tunnels. These tunnels, some of which visitors can walk through today, were the beginning, as the first layer of what would become the most extensive underground military complex in Britain. And remarkably, one of these medieval tunnels cuts through a rough-hewn passage that archaeologists believe may date to the siege itself. If they are right, visitors today are walking through an 800-year-old mine shaft where medieval soldiers fought and died in the dark. Beneath the castle, they refused to surrender. For nearly 600 years after the siege, the medieval tunnels beneath Dover Castle sat largely unused. The castle remained strategically important. It was maintained, garrisoned, and modernized through the centuries. But the tunnels were a relic of a different age of warfare. Then, in the 1790s, a new threat emerged from across the Channel, and suddenly, those tunnels were not nearly enough. Napoleon Bonaparte was reshaping Europe by 1803. He had concentrated approximately 130,000 troops along the French coast at Boulogne, just 21 miles from Dover. On clear days, the garrison at Dover Castle could see the French encampment with the naked eye. They could see the barges. They could see the troops drilling on the shore. England had not faced a credible invasion threat of this scale since the Spanish Armada in 1588. And the military planners at Dover had a problem. The castle could not hold enough soldiers to repel a full-scale invasion force. There was no room to build additional barracks on the clifftop without compromising the castle's defences, and the town of Dover below was already overwhelmed with troops. The solution came from General William Twiss of the Royal Engineers. If there was no room above ground, they would build below it. Between 1797 and 1802, work crews dug over 3 miles of new tunnels entirely by hand into the chalk beneath Dover Castle. No machinery, no explosives, just men with picks and shovels carving passages through the white cliffs at a depth of roughly 50 feet below the surface. The tunnels were designed as barracks. They became known as the casemates, a network of interconnected passages wide enough for rows of bunks, storage areas, and basic living quarters. When the first troops moved in during 1803, the casemates could accommodate up to 2,000 soldiers and officers. They were the only underground barracks ever constructed in Britain. No other military installation in the country, before or since, has housed soldiers underground on this scale. The conditions were grim. The tunnels were dimly lit. There was little warmth. Condensation dripped constantly from the chalk walls, running down the brickwork that lined the passages to prevent the soft chalk from collapsing. The air was thick with the smell of men, stale food, and damp rock. Soldiers lived, slept, and ate in groups of 8 to 30, packed into sections that offered no natural light and no ventilation beyond what drifted in from the tunnel entrances. Imagine being a young soldier in 1803, posted to Dover to defend England against Napoleon's invasion. You have been told that 130,000 French troops are visible across the water, that the invasion could come any day, and your quarters are a chalk tunnel 50 feet underground, where water runs down the walls and the only light comes from candles and oil lamps. You are living inside the white cliffs of Dover, literally inside them. The cliffs that you have been told since childhood represent the first and last defence of England. The tunnel layout was methodical, 4 main passages served as soldiers' barracks. 3 additional tunnels were reserved for officers. Smaller connecting passages linked the major route, creating a network that allowed movement without ever surfacing. The walls were lined with brick to prevent the soft chalk from collapsing, and the passages were wide enough for bunks to be arranged in rows with storage for ammunition and supplies built into alcoves. But no amount of engineering could make the tunnels comfortable. There was no natural ventilation. The chalk, porous and wet, and wept moisture constantly. In winter, the tunnels were cold enough to see your breath. In summer, the temperature was bearable, but the air quality was not. 2,000 men breathing, cooking, and sleeping in an enclosed space 50 feet underground. The stale, damp atmosphere became its own form of endurance test. The soldiers waited and waited, week after week, month after month. They drilled, they prepared, and they stared across the channel at an invasion force that never embarked. The invasion never came. The Royal Navy's dominance of the Channel, culminating in Nelson's victory at Trafalgar in 1805, ensured that Napoleon's barges never sailed. The soldiers in the casemates had endured years of underground existence for an enemy that did not arrive after the Napoleonic Wars ended. But the tunnels found a brief second use, housing the Coast Blockade Service, a force tasked with combating the rampant smuggling along the Kent coast. But by the late 1820s, even that operation had moved elsewhere. The tunnels were abandoned. For over 100 years, the casemates sat empty in the dark beneath Dover Castle. The brick-lined passages echoed with nothing. The bunks were removed. The chalk walls sweated moisture into empty rooms. 3 miles of hand-dug military infrastructure, the only underground barracks in British history, forgotten completely. Until 1938, when someone realised that England was about to face another invasion threat from across the Channel, and that the tunnels beneath Dover Castle might be needed once more. There is a pattern here that is worth noting. Dover's tunnels have been abandoned and rediscovered repeatedly across centuries, dug in desperation during one crisis, forgotten in peacetime, and then reopened when the next threat materialised. The chalk preserved them perfectly each time. The tunnels did not decay. They simply waited, and in 1938, they had been waiting for over 100 years. They were about to become the most important rooms in England. But before that, it is worth noting what happened at Dover during the First World War, because it foreshadows everything that came after. The tunnels themselves were not extensively used during the Great War. They remained dormant beneath the castle. But Dover itself became one of the most strategically important ports in Britain. The Admiralty Harbour controlled the movement of ships through the strait, both supporting troops and supplies flowing to and from France. A port war signal station was established in 1914, using flags and wireless to communicate with vessels and coastal stations, providing early warning of enemy attack. Dover was bombed from the air. The first bomb dropped on English soil in the First World War fell near Dover Castle on Christmas Eve 1914. Zeppelins followed. The castle and the town endured repeated attacks throughout the war. Dover became a fortress town, its entire population living in the shadow of the conflict just 21 miles across the water. The lesson of the First World War was clear. Dover was not just a castle, it was a front line. And when the next war came, the military planners who modernised the tunnels in 1938 knew exactly what they were preparing for. They had seen Dover under fire before. Oh, they knew it would happen again. By May 1940, the war was being lost. Hitler's blitzkrieg had crushed France in weeks. The British Expeditionary Force, nearly 200,000 soldiers sent to defend France alongside their allies, had been driven back to the coast. Belgian forces had surrendered. The French army was collapsing, and nearly 400,000 Allied troops were trapped in a shrinking pocket around the port town of Dunkirk, with the German army closing in from 3 sides and the English Channel at their back. The military assessment was bleak. Planners estimated that, at best, 45,000 men could be rescued by sea before the Germans overran the beaches. The rest, over 300,000 soldiers, would be killed or captured. It would be the worst military disaster in British history. or it would likely end any realistic chance of continuing the war. And the man tasked with preventing this catastrophe was sitting in a chalk tunnel beneath Dover Castle. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay had been brought out of retirement by Winston Churchill specifically for this crisis. He was appointed Vice Admiral Dover and given command of naval operations in the Channel. His headquarters were the old Napoleonic tunnels, the same casemates that had been abandoned for over a century, now hastily modernized with telephone lines, plotting tables, and communications equipment. Ramsay's command room stood on the site of a disused electrical generator, a dynamo, that had once powered the tunnel lighting. When the operation to evacuate Dunkirk needed a code name, someone looked at the defunct machine in the corner of the room. Operation Dynamo, the most famous naval evacuation in history, named after a broken generator. On 26 May 1940, at just before 7 in the evening, Winston Churchill, who had been Prime Minister for only 16 days, gave the order to begin. Ramsay and his small staff went to work. The challenge was staggering. Dunkirk's harbour had been heavily damaged by German bombing. The port's deep water berths were largely unusable. The only viable loading point was the East Mole, a narrow, wooden breakwater extending into the sea, never designed for the embarkation of troops. And the beaches stretching east of Dunkirk were shallow, far too shallow for large naval vessels to approach. From his tunnel beneath Dover Castle, Ramsay coordinated a fleet that grew larger and more improvised with each passing day. Royal Navy destroyers. There were channel ferries, cargo ships, trawlers, anything that could carry men across 21 miles of open water while under air attack. But it was not enough. The beaches were the problem. Hundreds of thousands of men stood in endless lines, stretching across the sand, wading out into the surf, waiting for rescue. Large ships could not reach them. The shallow water kept the fleet at a distance. Men drowned trying to swim to vessels anchored too far from shore. And so, the call went out for small boats. What happened next? What happened next has become one of the defining stories of the Second World War. The call went out across southern England for small boats. Any boat, every boat. The Admiralty requisitioned vessels from harbours, marinas, and private moorings. Approximately 700 small civilian vessels answered: fishing boats, yachts, pleasure steamers, lifeboats, river launches, Thames barges, cockle boats, even a paddle steamer. Some were sailed by their civilian owners, who volunteered knowing they were heading into a war zone. Others were crewed by naval ratings, hastily assigned to unfamiliar vessels. These were not warships. They were weekend sailing boats, commercial fishing trawlers, and river pleasure craft. Some had never been to sea. Their crews had never been under fire. But they could do the one thing the Royal Navy destroyers could not: navigate water shallow enough to reach the men standing on the beaches. The little ships would cross the channel from Dover and other southern ports, a journey of roughly 3 hours in good conditions, approach the beaches at Dunkirk, where the water was sometimes only a few feet deep, or pull alongside soldiers standing waist or chest, deep in the surf, haul as many men aboard as the vessel could carry without capsizing, and then ferry them out to the larger ships waiting in deeper water. Then they would turn around and do it again and again for 9 days. For 9 days, from 26th May to 4th June 1940, this operation ran around the clock. And for 9 days, Bertram Ramsay directed it all from a chalk tunnel 50 feet below the ground. The conditions in the tunnel were intense. Plotting tables covered in maps tracked every vessel in the fleet. Telephone switchboards connected Ramsay to the Admiralty in London, to coastal stations along the south coast, and to ships at sea. The hum of communications equipment was constant. Staff worked without sleep. The air was close and stale. Above them, should the chalk walls of the White Cliffs absorb the vibrations of German bombs falling on Dover? Meanwhile, on the beaches at Dunkirk, the situation was desperate. German Stuka dive bombers screamed down on the exposed lines of soldiers. Artillery fire churned the sand. Men waited for hours, sometimes days, standing in queues that stretched across the beach and into the water. Bodies of the dead lay where they fell. Fuel dumps burned. sending columns of black smoke into the sky. For the first few days, a westerly wind blew that smoke across the beaches, creating an accidental smokescreen that partially shielded the evacuation from the Luftwaffe. Then, on the 29th of May, the wind changed direction. The smoke cleared. The beaches were exposed. The German air attacks that followed were devastating. Junkers Ju-87, Stuka dive bombers, with their screaming sirens designed to terrorize, plunged out of clear skies onto the exposed lines of soldiers. Heinkel medium bombers targeted the ships offshore. Fuel dumps were hit and exploded, sending towers of fire across the sand. Ships were sunk in the harbour and in the open water. The pace of rescue slowed dramatically. Evacuation was forced to nighttime-only hours. Inside the tunnels at Dover, Ramsay and his staff absorbed each setback and recalculated. Routes were changed. Ships were rerouted. Timing was adjusted to exploit the hours of darkness. The communications switchboards buzzed constantly, messages flowing in from the Admiralty, from coastal stations, from ships at sea, and from the beach itself. Every hour mattered. Every ship mattered. Every decision made in that chalk tunnel 50 feet below the surface determined whether men on a beach 21 miles away would live or die. Ramsay barely slept for the entire 9 days. Neither did most of his staff. The pressure was relentless, and the consequences of error were measured in human lives. A ship sent to the wrong route could be sunk by a minefield. A miscalculated tide could strand vessels on the beach. A failure in communications could leave thousands of men waiting for rescue that was not coming. An underground hospital was established in a newly excavated section of the tunnels, the annex level, to treat wounded servicemen brought back from Dunkirk and pilots shot down over the channel. Operating theatres functioned beneath the cliffs, staffed by military surgeons working under the same chalk ceilings where Napoleonic soldiers had once slept. At 10:50, on the night of June 2nd, Captain W.G. Tennant, the senior naval officer at Dunkirk, radioed a message to Ramsay in the Dover tunnels. 3 words: BEF, evacuated. Tennant and General Harold Alexander then toured the harbour and beaches in a motor launch, calling out through a megaphone to make sure no British soldiers had been left behind. When they were satisfied, they sailed for England. The numbers exceeded every expectation. Military planners had hoped to save 45,000 men. Operation Dynamo evacuated 338,226, 198,000 British and Canadian troops, 140,000 French soldiers, 7 times the original estimate, the largest military evacuation in history. Of those, roughly 98,000 were rescued directly from the beaches by the little ships, the civilian vessels that ferried men through shallow water to the waiting destroyers. The remaining 239,000 were evacuated via the East Mole and the harbour. Every one of those numbers represented a decision made in the tunnels beneath Dover. Every route, every ship assignment, every timing calculation flowed through Ramsay's command room. Churchill later spoke to the House of Commons about the evacuation. He warned against calling it a victory. Wars, he said, are not won by evacuations, but he acknowledged the significance of what had been achieved. The army that would eventually return to liberate Europe had been saved. Ramsay was summoned to personally report the results of Operation Dynamo to King George VI. He was made a Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath. 4 years later, he would return to these same tunnels to help plan the opposite journey. Not an evacuation from France, but an invasion of it. All of it, from first signal to final count, coordinated from a chalk tunnel beneath Dover Castle by a retired admiral working from a room named after a broken dynamo. After Dunkirk, the tunnels did not go quiet. If anything, they became more important. By 1941, the tunnel network had been expanded further. A new level, the Annex, was fully developed with hospital wards, dormitories, kitchens and mess halls. A state-of-the-art military telephone exchange was installed with switchboards that required constant staffing. A separate tunnel was dug just to house the batteries, and electrical chargers needed to keep the communications equipment running. A powered ventilation system was installed to combat the condensation that had plagued the tunnels since the Napoleonic era, with heaters and electrically driven fans forcing dry air through the passages. From 1943 onwards, the tunnels served as a combined headquarters for all three branches of the British military, Army, Navy, and Air Force, operating together underground in a way that was revolutionary for wartime command structure. But the tunnel's most extraordinary wartime role was one that remained classified for decades. In 1944, with the Allied invasion of Europe being planned in secret, Dover Castle became the centre of one of the most elaborate deception operations in military history, Operation Fortitude South. The objective was breathtaking in its audacity. The Allies needed the German High Command to believe that the D-Day invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais, the point on the French coast closest to Dover, rather than the actual target, the beaches of Normandy. To achieve this, the Allies invented an entire phantom army. The first United States Army group, VIII, existed only on paper. It had no real troops, no real tanks, no real equipment, but from a signal centre deep inside the Dover Castle tunnels, codenamed Q Dover, British and Canadian signals units worked around the clock in 8-hour shifts, 7 days a week, transmitting hundreds of encoded radio messages that simulated VIII's communications. To German intelligence, listening from across the Channel, it sounded like a massive invasion force was assembling in southeast England, preparing to cross at the narrowest point of the Channel. The signallers themselves did not know what they were transmitting. The messages were encoded. They simply sent them, hour after hour, day after day, knowing only that the work was critical. The deception was devastatingly effective. German intelligence remained convinced that VIII was real and that the main invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. As late as August 1944, a full 2 months after the actual D-Day landings in Normandy on the 6th of June, German reserves that should have been rushing to Normandy to repel the invasion stayed pinned at Pas-de-Calais, waiting for an attack that would never come. Thousands of Allied soldiers survived the Normandy landings because of signals sent from a tunnel beneath Dover Castle. The deception that helped liberate Western Europe was broadcast from inside the White Cliffs. After the war ended, you might expect the tunnels to have been decommissioned. They were not. The Cold War brought a new threat, and the British government looked once again at the chalk passages beneath Dover Castle. In the 1960s, the deepest level of tunnels, known as the Dumpy level, was converted into a regional seat of government, designated RSG-12. It was designed to serve as the emergency headquarters for the governance of southeast England in the event of nuclear war. The bunker could house approximately 270 staff members, both civilian and military. It contained dormitories, dining facilities, communications equipment, and, remarkably, a BBC radio studio. In the event of a nuclear strike, a broadcasting team would descend into the chalk tunnels beneath Dover Castle and transmit to whatever was left of the population above. The planners believed the chalk would provide significant radiation protection. They were partially right, but they later realized that chalk is porous. Contaminated rainwater from a nuclear fallout could seep down through the rock and into the tunnels. The shelter might not have been as safe as they hoped. Think about what this means. In a bunker, carved into the same chalk where medieval knights had fought with picks and shovels, Cold War planners were preparing for the end of civilization. The same tunnels that had sheltered men from French swords in 1216, from Napoleon's threatened invasion in 1803, and from German bombs in 1940 were now being fitted out to survive a nuclear holocaust. The chalk cliffs had been asked to protect England from every kind of threat that human beings had invented over 8 centuries. And each time the response was the same: dig deeper. The nuclear bunker was decommissioned in 1984 officially on grounds of cost, though by that time Cold War tensions had begun to ease, and with that, the military chapter of Dover Castle's tunnels finally closed. From medieval miners fighting in the dark in 1216 to Cold War nuclear planners in 1984, the tunnels had been in continuous military use, on and off, for over 760 years. No other site in Britain can make that claim. Or no other underground complex has served so many different purposes across so many centuries. The tunnels beneath Dover Castle are not a historical curiosity. They are a continuous thread running through nearly the entire military history of England. In 1990, English Heritage opened the tunnels to the public for the first time. The passages where Ramsay had coordinated Operation Dynamo, where soldiers had lived during the Napoleonic Wars, where signallers had broadcast phantom armies to deceive the Nazis, all of it became accessible to visitors. Today, guided tours take roughly 50 minutes. Visitors walk through the casemate level where Ramsay's command room has been preserved. They pass through the underground hospital in the annex, where the sounds and atmosphere of the wartime medical station have been recreated. They see the plotting tables, the communications equipment, the narrow chalk corridors where decisions were made that altered the course of the war. In 2024, a major restoration project opened previously inaccessible sections of the medieval tunnels and Georgian casemates for the first time. Visitors can now walk through passages that are 800 years old, tunnels that may date to the siege of 1216 itself. A digital reconstruction requiring over 800 hours of research shows the castle as it likely appeared before Prince Louis's forces attacked it. But much of the tunnel network remains hidden. 5 levels extend into the chalk. The bastion level is still largely lost to public access under investigation. Other sections remain sealed, their contents and condition unknown. For the 5 levels of the tunnel network each tell a different chapter of the story. The casemate level, the Napoleonic barracks where Ramsay later set up his command, is the most visited. The annex level, with its underground hospital, gives visitors a visceral sense of what wartime medicine looked like beneath the chalk. The dumpy level, the deepest, still carries the Cold War modifications, the dormitories, the communications equipment, the BBC studio that was never used, but the bastion level remains largely inaccessible, still under investigation. And other sections of the network remain sealed entirely. 3 miles of passages, 5 levels deep, and we still have not fully mapped everything that lies beneath Dover Castle. The chalk preserves. That is what it does. It preserved the Roman lighthouse for 2,000 years. It preserved the medieval tunnels for 800. It preserved the Napoleonic barracks through a century of abandonment. Whatever else is down there, the chalk is keeping it safe. Just as it kept the soldiers safe, the evacuees safe, the signallers safe, and the Cold War planners safe. The White Cliffs of Dover have always been a symbol of England. But the real story is not the cliffs themselves. It is what is inside them. Dover Castle sits on the White Cliffs, as it has for over 800 years. Visitors come for the keep, the walls, the views across to France. They photograph the Roman lighthouse. They walk the battlements. But the real story of Dover Castle is not above them. It is beneath their feet. Down there in the chalk, medieval soldiers fought hand-to-hand in tunnels too narrow to stand upright. Napoleonic troops slept in passages where condensation ran down the walls. A retired admiral coordinated the rescue of 338,000 men from a room named after a broken generator. Signallers broadcast a phantom army to deceive Hitler. And Cold War planners built a BBC studio to broadcast after a nuclear war. 800 years of British history, 3 miles of tunnels, 5 levels deep, and most people who visit Dover Castle have no idea that any of it is there. That is the tunnel network beneath Britain's most famous castle, the one nobody talks about. Maybe they should.